Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly webinar. I'm Jane Yu, the Director of Growth and Education Sector Lead at Prefish.io. Since earlier this year, education companies, tutoring schools in China have been experiencing the most significant policy blow, known as double reduction. So what is double reduction? Are there regulation changes to the other segments in education as well? What are the impacts and the opportunities? So today we are putting together this education market updates with an aim to help education companies and institutions better navigating in the Chinese market. So I will start with a market update and the regulation changes. Then our CEO Ting Zhang and education expert Dr. Li Yuan will join me for an interactive session to answer your questions submitted when you register this webinar. You're also welcome to submit new questions in the chat box. So for those who are new to Prefish, we are a digital platform of quality cross-border business services. We support businesses doing international trade in 3 innovative ways. We have fixed price services, which are pre-scoped and best value. You can also use our online marketplace to post your projects and select our pre-approved bilingual talents by yourself. To meet your specific needs, we can also help you with business development in education and provide advisory. So let's now get started with what is double reduction. So last week, the Ministry of Education in China established a new department, which is to implement this new policy and to regulate tutoring schools in China. This new regulation will be implemented in 9 regions and the provinces from July, which is just next week. So the regions include Beijing, Shanghai, Jiangsu, etc. So for 12 months, the trial period will be for 12 months before this policy will be rolled out across the country. So firstly, after-school institutions are forbidden to offer teaching programs outside the school terms, including weekends and holidays. Weekday tutoring, which runs in the evenings, will also be restricted. Secondly, education companies and the training centers in principle, with principal business focus on academic subjects and personal development are forbidden to go public. So although it's called double reduction, but on top of this, advertisement in relate to after-school programs, both online and offline, in the mainstream media and the public spaces will be banned. So why China is posing such strict restrictions on its private tutoring sector, which accounts for about $120 billion US. So in recent years, there has been many opinions, circular implementing opinions announced by the government to regulate this subject-oriented training and to reduce the study load of school children. I won't say that these new regulations are unexpected, but it's definitely much strict and thorough to tutoring schools. So since 2014, China's education companies received over tens of billions investment each year. and K-12 after-school education is a key investment area. As to August last year, the average amount of a single investment event has increased to over 170 million yuan. So the current, this new policy may lead to reduced investment and a reduced number of IPOs in short term. On the other hand, the education companies in the past 2 or 3 years, they want to stand out for the very fierce competition. They put great investment in marketing to gain attention from like students and their parents. They did a lot on social media and to promote their services through KOL and live streaming, but comparatively with less focus on the quality of teaching. So to the government, the new regulation aims to kind of ease the above-mentioned pressure on school children and also to lower the families' living costs. On the other hand, to calm down the hot investment in this sector as well. So the Ministry of Education is also trying to correct a phenomenon, which is the schools should be responsible for students' learning rather than the tutoring companies in terms of academic subjects teaching. With these changes going to happen very soon, we can see that schools in some regions of China have started to allow students to stay at school after teaching hours to complete their homework and wait till their parents finish work. And in Shanghai and the other 12 regions, we can also see that the local government are organizing summer schools, childcare centers to ease the pressure on parents when after-school tutoring is going to be not being permitted anymore. We can also see that some educational companies and groups have started to develop non-academic programs, such as sports and drama, etc. So let's now move on to another segment. So China has been promoting industrial upgrading. In this context, skilled talents in China are in high demands. In 2019, the government issued a framework to reform China's vocational education system and allocated about 100 billion yuan to develop the vocational training system. This May, China also announced a 27 billion budget for this year on vocational training. China has been very strongly advocating the integration of production with education through encouraging universities and enterprises to work together to develop training plans, and by establishing a number of high-level training centers. So this framework has also started piloting a program of academic certificates plus at skill level certificates in 1+X model. So we can see that non-academic training at a skill and practice level is the emerging trend. So as to the non-state education on the in the private education sector, the government also announced in this May a newly revised version of regulations. So there are like 12 new rules on school curricula and ownership of the private schools have been announced. The new law restricts that the teaching of foreign curricula in Chinese private schools from kindergarten to grade 9. It also prohibits the ownership or control any of the private K9 Chinese schools by foreign entities. Secondly, the state-run schools are now prohibited from using government funds to operate or participate in the operation of private schools. They cannot be allowed to generate any profit through any means, such as charging management fees. So any activities related to private education is now forbidden with state-run schools. On top of this, the K9 schools will no longer be able to organize entrance tests or recruit in advance or recruit outside of their catchment area. Besides, the president or the chair of the board of directors or any other decision-making body at a Chinese private school must be Chinese national, and the board must include representatives from the regulators. However, we can also see that China's private education sector has been expanded to a much wider scope, which I mean, it is not only now in preschool education, but it has been expanded to the higher education from degree programs to non-degree programs as well. So the government aims to kind of strengthen the supervision in non-state schools and to avoid the sector become overly commercialized. At the same time, to promote non-for-profit private education beyond the compulsory years, such as to promote more vocational training. So despite the changes in regulation and policies, I think we shall always keep in mind the unchanged fundamentals. To start with, like China is still reforming its education system. The national policy of reform remains unchanged. And during this process of opening up, there are challenges, but I would say there are more opportunities as well. On the other side, that China represents one of the largest education technology markets worldwide because of its large student population and a growing middle class that place great importance on education. So there are favorable policies towards the adoption of technology, and digitalization in education is kind of driving the market at the moment. At another layer, we can also see that families and individuals have a very strong desire of education with international outlook. They want to prepare their children for further study internationally. So from the above overview, we can see the changes, but based on the fundamentals, we would like to say that China is a very big market with many layers and tiers, where a foreign company can seek for growth opportunities with a combined strategy to have a segment focus with regional strategy. So firstly, the double reduction is more on academic subject programs. The development of all-round education or quality-oriented education is expected to be the main contributor to the growth of K-12 segment, such as we mentioned on sports or green school, environmental education, drama, etc. Vocational education has been generating supply and demand as well. So impacted by the pandemic in 2020, the development of online vocational education is accelerating. It is estimated that all-round education and vocational training would take a very high percentage of the overall education market total. Well, traditional offline education is actively embracing technology and developing online business. The online education is also developing to offline. We can see that the online and offline businesses are merging. On the technology side, we will say China is still at the initial stage of the application of learning technology. Domestic AI plus education requires our joint efforts across different dimensions from domestically in China and also from foreign companies as well. So with fierce competition in first and second tier cities, the market in lower tier cities and regions is becoming a new focus. So when we are thinking about a strategy in China, we have to consider phased plan with regional focus to start with. So to summarize the above regulation changes and the market updates, I would say opportunities come with changes. You may need to have Asia strategy, but any Asia strategy is incomplete without a presence in China. So to understand the local market and to update it with the trends and the changes, and to have a trustworthy local partner may be the first steps you will consider to succeed in China. So let's now move on to our Q&A session. So now I would like to welcome our CEO Ting Zhang and Dr. Li Yuan to join us for this Q&A session. So we have received many questions submitted before today, and we will answer those questions now. And you're also welcome to submit new questions to the chat box.
Great. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Jane. That's very good presentation. I hope that gives everyone an idea of the reason why government is now stepping up the enforcement of these policies, which are not totally new, but it's coming to much more obviously effect to business. So now we have Li online. Li, can you say hello?
Hello, can you see me here?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. So these are the questions. We received a lot of questions, but we sort of kind of grouped them into two. Actually, the first one is more about online education, the technical side and learning. And then the second group is on the doing business side. And there were other questions already covered in Jane's talk, which is more about the international schools, about the actually running of the schools, the impact on those. So Lee, I think a lot of these questions are about really the regulations, what are they? I think Jane covered some of them, but also what do you expect this development for online education, particularly high education level, following this changes in regulatory?
Yeah, I think the regulation, as Jean has mentioned, mainly about after-school tutoring market. But in terms of online learning in higher education, I think that's not really covered in that policy document at the moment. But I think in terms of the question people asked here is about what development do you expect on online education? I think for the last few years in China, the MOOC has been become a big movement, a government-funded MOOC platform, and the universities all developed various MOOC platforms, courses. So especially during the pandemic, so lots of students and the teachers has been used MOOC to study online. And this really helped we look into how online learning will be developed in higher education. I think one of the things worth to notice that lots of MOOCs has become credit-bearing courses during the pandemic. So students will take courses on the MOOC platform and then will be receive the credits from their own universities. So that's it's a new development. I think in terms of the international education online, there's still some barriers on the qualification, whether Chinese government would recognize the online qualification. That's still a big barrier needed to be addressed, I think, at government level. Yeah, and some other question about about whether the regulation, how this may affect foreign companies about their after-school tutoring system. I think for the online education, there's two areas because it is about internet is a technology company, what regulation you should follow. Also, it's the education company. These two areas, it's all the company need to look into what the regulation you need to follow. But for the latest regulations, if you are involved in after-school tutoring market, then the new regulation will definitely affect your business and what the new opportunity you may need to look into, as what Jen has mentioned.
And I think also the question here we look at is the virtual tutoring, and for those edutech business aimed directly to parents. So they are not sort of provided in the school center or to the school. If they're directly to parents, what are this impact for them?
Yeah, I think there's one safety actually from the after this regulation on after-school tutoring market, because the education responsibility will be shifting to schools and the family. So how parents should take responsibility to guide their children's study is very important as well. Especially important now, I think, when the country just simply send the student to after-school tutoring class. I think there's some initiative has been launched by government to set up some parenting schools to educate parents about how to educate their children as well. So I don't know whether this is kind of direction that edtech business may need to focus on as well.
So it's educating the parents so they know how to educate the children.
Yeah, I think that is the kind of direction we have to say shift. Because before, lots of parents are just thinking simply, I send my kids to after-school tutoring company. Now, if they can't really do that, then it's their own responsibility. But it's not just, as Jane has mentioned, what government is trying to do is not just develop students' academic subject area, it is the whole personal development. So, and that is the parents' responsibility.
So now that is leads to we have a live question related to from one person. It says, do the changes in restriction like the reducing after school tutoring mean that government spending in the government controlled education increase? If so, do you have numbers or examples? And then it also says who organize online education? Is the expect increase not in contradiction with the reduction of after school tutoring? So there are two of that. Can you answer some of that?
Yeah, I think actually first the government responsible for school education, and this is funded by government from central government and local government as any other countries. But also the after-school tutoring market is most funded by private company. So there are two different systems. I think what the government is trying to do is regulate the after-school tutoring market. It's not say, oh, completely we don't want any after-school tutoring. Just you have to operate in certain time, what the content, what the service you can provide, and how much you can charge. So it's a regulated market rather than like what before, what happened so much is the private investor in it. So I don't think this from funding structure, they are related in that control the after-school tutoring market and then increase the school funding. Yeah.
So what about the last question in this submitted? We are talking about now maybe some of the learning, the virtual tutoring would go into the schools, right? Because you can't go out. What you see that is that how important is virtual tutoring actually happen in schools? Is that possible? Is that what the question is?
Yeah. Actually, the Chinese government is always put lots of efforts on education technology, the technology in education, and especially now AI in education is very much in government agenda. So like a few years ago, the Chinese government has launched the Smart Learning Initiative. So most schools has already equipped with a smart learning system that is online, has hardware, software, and of course, and because the traditional Chinese education system and the teaching learning approach, how well this online learning system called the smart learning system has been used in teaching learning. That's a question, but definitely develop digital technology, digital education, and AI education is much on the agenda in the Chinese school system.
Okay, yes. So that it makes sense. Now, I mean, you are based in China, in Zhuhai, in a campus of Beijing Normal University. So in your work, you see all those trends happening. So that actually, on one hand, you have reduction of the after school. On the other hand, you do see more education tech used on online education. So that is not contradictory, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that mainly it's from the business sense that kind of how private company that after school tutoring system compete with the school system on how we should educate students, because after school tutoring system, the market did put lots of pressure on parents, on family, on children. And that's the main reason why the Chinese government have the regulation and the policy. It's not Chinese government do not want to develop online education or digital technology in education. I think that's different. Yeah.
Yes. So I totally understand. So now I think let's move on to the business questions, where we have also received quite a few, mainly around the finding partners and engaging sales agent, and also about how you prepare themselves. So I will sort of start sharing some of my notes, but then we can also bring in Lee to comment from your perspective. I think as Jing and Jiao both mentioned, there are these changes, but doesn't mean that there's no more business opportunities for UK education providers. And so I think the first question we talk about what kind of provider would be competitive. I think no matter what segment you are in, those who can meet a significant demand with a bigger size of demand, with quality product and competitive pricing, and these both are very important. When I say competitive pricing, I mean value for money, not necessarily have to be cheaper than the domestic product or services, but you have to deliver extremely good value for competitive pricing. And then as again, doing business in China, there's unfortunately no quick wins, maybe in the past, but now with the government regulation changes, education, I think in China is going to move back gradually to actually bring the value to the students, to parents, rather than quick money making. So which means that company needs also to commit a longer term, and have a realistic roadmap in China. To develop business takes probably 1 to 2 years to get your business established, and then have a longer term strategy. Excuse me. And also for those companies who do not have, for those companies do have Chinese subsidiaries or representative office, it is important that you have a localized sort of decision-making process that's agile enough and effective, because in China everything happens fast. The sort of China speed, and particularly with the digital trend of not just the use of technology, but actually how business is done in China. You may have noticed or have heard that because of COVID in China, now there's a lot of meetings have changed from previously face-to-face, it's almost default, and now to online, and people are more receptive to buying even services digitally. And we have seen a recent McKinsey report saying that over half of the companies and business in China are prepared to procure services in a digital way, i.e. not to have to meet you face to face and have meal together, which is the traditional way how China does business. And that's still going to remain, but less proportionately. So which is good. And on a practical level, it's always good to plan and, for example, to do research, to understand the competition, who are your competitors. Particularly, I think we learned that a lot from talking to Lee, that the Chinese companies are actually very good when it comes to the edutech hardware side and AI use, for example. So you need to understand that is there a market for you, and if there is, then you make the plan to go in. But before you go into the market, prepare to protect your IP. For example, register trademark, and getting a Chinese name would help. Some of the company, it's going to be very difficult to pronounce for Chinese teachers, head teachers or parents. And then it's really then to engage. I think when people ask, how do you find partners? I just wanted to quickly touch on that. In China, the education market on the sales distribution is a very fragmented market. So there's almost no company that has a national coverage that are able to get access to every single school or every single city even. Typically, the distributors are per city. Some of them do better, a few cities in a province. In general, you need to look at finding partners for regions, and of course for different segment. If it's for early stage or for K9 or for K12, it's again, you need to find different partners for that. And if we look at how do the education providers best prepare them for the shift in market in China, I think those both Jane and Lee mentioned that. I think first, coming to our webinar today to actually listen to the regulatory changes, understand that, and stay on top of that, it's important itself. And then to actually to see through this and to pivot your business according to those scenarios, and so build a more sustainable model. I think, for example, we have seen that vocational education has a very good growth at the moment, and also for higher education have not been much affected by this policy. So therefore, if your product and services previously were aiming at K-12, but potentially can be used for higher education, then that would be a good one to look at. So pivoting towards the different, diversification into more segments would help. And also really focus on the value-driven services. Do you really provide value to the students and parents? I think as Lee mentioned, that the Chinese government is still encouraging edutech and the wide provision of education opportunities. So if you do have contacts in China in the government, whether these are national or local, it would be a good time to engage them, to speak to them and ask them what are their comments and feedback about your particular service or particular company, and that would be always helpful. And just to finally touching upon how can you best navigate the changes in policy. This one particular, I think, is from a tutoring company. So I think you can always ask your customers or your distributors and partners what they need from you, what kind of support. I think maybe if you are based, for example, outside China, you may be less influenced in a certain way. I think that I want to ask Lee now. If Lee, do you want to comment on some of these questions? But also, if you provide like remote tutoring, remote services from outside China, do you also get impacted by those regulations?
I think it's I think most remote online teaching was organized by the Chinese company, by the company in China. Of course, those as long as your service, your customer in China, you should follow the rules. That's what I understand. Yeah.
Okay. And so what are the other things you think they can prepare or adjust to the regulation changes while they are now looking to expand in China? Are there any other recommendations?
I think I agree with everything you said there. It is a difficult time in terms of the pandemic or the new regulation in China and uncertainty in the market. But I think it's always it's a good time to prepare, look into the opportunity as well, as long as your products, your service are really have the I think that needed for that have the market in China. It definitely you need still look into it, that you can, if you believe your products and your service that can really help China or parents, students for their provide a better education for them. I think there's still opportunity. Yeah, you should really look into it.
On a tactical level, I think people ask, how can we find a sales agent in China? I think there's really three ways. Either you do it yourself, you have a market research, you find who are the distribute sales agent in your particular segment, and then you reach out to them. That's one. The second is you have a referral recommendation from someone already working with those agents and who are in your complementary sort of segment or product services who are already UK business doing that in China. And but in all those cases, you really need to do DD. You do your own due diligence and make sure that what the company presents you are true, particularly on whether they have experience of dealing those. Of course, you can also, which is what we can talk later if you talk to our team, you can outsource that finding sales agent process to another company, and Prefish actually has a service to help you develop business on that. But overall, in terms of how do you partner with education companies in China, it's really finding that strategic fit. I think Lee just mentioned that you have to find that your product portfolio fits into theirs, and then that you can be part of their value chain, so that you are not just insignificant in their product portfolio. It's very important so that you can get more attention from your partner. And also, don't treat your Chinese customer just as a Chinese customer. Be open-minded. Sometimes you can, for example, you can have a mutual distribution. You could properly help them distribute some of their products outside China to other parts of the world, and then make that relationship deeper. And that's also more beneficial in the longer term. Of course, communication is important, etc. So I think that's all. We can talk longer, but we are running out of time already. So I pass it back to Jane now.
Yeah, thank you, Ting and Dr. Lee. I agree all your answers, and want to add to what Ting just mentioned on the partner identification and to find agents in China. I think you need, when you enter to the China market, you do need to kind of reposition your product. The target clients domestically or in the other export markets may not exactly the same in China. I think this kind of repositioning is very important to help you with. And you may not to start with a national partner, and instead a regional partner may be a very good starting point. But we can definitely talk with you about your specific questions. We received so many questions before when you register, so I will reply to you if we cannot cover it today. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, to join us today. And you can review this webinar on our website and to read our insights and the free resources in relation to the Chinese market in all different aspects. You are also very welcome to join our next webinar, which we will talk about the payment aspect regarding to the Chinese currency and how to pay your supplier in China and get money out of China. We are looking forward to see you very soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.